Hi everyone. So welcome to this session. We're talking about the evolution of shipboard IT operations. Now I'm Ian Richardson, the CEO and co-founder of theICEway, and I'm also the Seatrade Global's Technology Ambassador. And I'm going to be joined for this session by a couple of very special guests who are waiting in the wings. So first up we have John Mayer, who is the VP of Operational Excellence at Royal Caribbean Group.
Thank you, Ian.
John. And next up is David Lehman, who's the Director of Information Technology at American Queen Steamboat Company. So take a seat, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing some, hopefully some audience participation. So if you have some questions, be thinking of them, please, because we'll try and get time for questions. And that goes for the people who are attending virtually as well. So what I'm going to try and do is multitask, which is very hard for someone like me. But I'm going to try and watch the swap card, and any questions that are coming in on swap card, I'll try and answer them as well. We had a problem this morning that I did this morning on a session, and I never got the questions through. So I ended up having to kind of get the panelists in a huddle afterwards to answer the questions after the event went live. But I'm informed this time that if I keep refreshing it, the questions will come in. So hopefully that'll work. So yeah, so now, I mean, based on, you wouldn't probably believe it, but based on my boyish good looks, I actually started out as an IT manager, IT operations manager in cruise about 20 years ago. So this topic of IT operations is really close to my heart. And I want to start with you, John, if that's all right.
Of course.
So why don't you give us a little bit of background about your role at Royal Caribbean and how you oversee the IT operations?
Okay, so thank you and welcome everybody. Good to see our participants here physically and as well as online. As Ian said, my name is John Maya. I'm actually the Vice President of Operational Excellence for Royal Caribbean Group. My scope of responsibility is all infrastructure and operations, shoreside and shipboard, which basically is all end user experience, hosting, network, which is voice, data, satellite, service management, and then also shipboard operations with the IT crew. So, okay. Been in the industry for about 3 years.
Cool. And how would you say that supporting the IT operations has evolved, I guess, in the years that you've been there?
It definitely has evolved as ship technology evolves. So as no surprise to everybody, ships continue becoming more and more digitized. And as a result, the skills that are required to maintain those operations are changing. And those are also evolving with how we ensure that things continue operating, whether it's for the crew, it's for the ship, but more importantly for our guests. What we've seen is what traditionally been a help desk with saying, hey, we'll resolve this in 4 hours. It has to get resolved in less than 4 minutes. So that's kind of a paradigm shift that we're changing, we're going through right now.
Yeah, people need things resolving immediately.
Yes.
Now. And it's 24/7, right?
24/7, yeah.
Yeah. And David, I just want to come to you. So obviously you've come from a quite similar large ship background, been in the industry for many years. But how does the approach to IT operations, how do you see the difference in your new role at what is a very different product?
Yeah, it is a very different product, but we approach it somewhat similarly, but somewhat differently. So first of all, there's no IT officer on board the vessel. So that's one challenge right there. We try to provide as much documentation as possible to be left on board, because there are going to be people who are non-technical that would be going to be reading it and needs to know how things are plugged in, where it needs to be plugged in, and so on. So we need to have very, very good documentation for a layperson. But otherwise, we approach it as the same manner on a very large vessel. We try to build resiliency in our systems, make it as easy as possible, ensure that everyone is self-sufficient, and just provide a good level of expected services that people come to expect, but also help them do their jobs. They got tough jobs on board the vessels, not only dealing with the day-to-day guests on board, but also just the operational things that occur on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, because the complexity on a smaller vessel it's no less complex, is it? You've still got to deal with the same challenges. You've just got less resources to deal with it.
Correct.
So you just have to be a bit more agile, I guess. And what do you think, and this is to either of you really, what do you think are the key aspects to running a really tight service desk on board a ship?
Well, I'll start. One of the things that before it was kind of one size fits all for everybody. There's a help desk, they contact the help desk, and as I mentioned, there were regular SLAs that were applied to the industry, and that industry could be cruising, could be healthcare, it could be security. But what has been recognized is that the help desk for a ship is very different than what it would be for shoreside operations. And with that, there has to be availability 24/7. There has to be a lot of empowerment by the IT crew on board to resolve issues and have the control and the ability to resolve issues right then and there without having to always rely on a shoreside resource to come in and help them out through that. Again, it's all around timing. How do we shorten that gap of time that is impacted by an incident?
And just to augment what John was saying, given our small vessels and there's no IT officer, responsiveness is key. One of the key areas that I try to look for within our staff, because again, they're there by themselves, and here they are bumping up against the problem, and they may have guests in front of them. So being very responsive, trying to have a solution or resolution at the first point of contact or call. Also very crucial on trying to get them over that hump that they're experiencing. Developing, like I mentioned earlier, documentation, knowledge base, how-to type of stuff, frequently asked questions, trying to give them as much documentation as possible so that they're more self-sufficient. But more than anything, just being there for them when they make that call or when they send that email, and being there for them.
Okay. And what about ITIL? So I guess if there is IT operations people in the audience, ITIL is a kind of set of infrastructure libraries that helps you run service desks. It's kind of like a framework of how you do it. Is it important, ITIL, the ITIL framework on ships or in cruise in general?
I would say, first of all, yes, it is, but it is different. It is different it has to adjust to the operation that needs to get, which is live and, as you said, 24/7, needs to manage through that. So there has to be repeatability in the various processes that we have on board.
And you mentioned documentation, but how do you handle that at Royal, John, in terms of keeping that knowledge base constantly up to date and making sure that everybody has access to it?
So I would say we have a lot of great documentation. The problem that we're going through right now is that we have a lot of repositories of that documentation. So you have to know where to look for it to find those processes, to find those answers. And one of the things that we're trying right now to do is to actually bring that into a knowledge management system, which is basically one storefront for all type of documentation.
Yeah, and the key thing is we run a 24/7 service desk at our company, and the key, I always say that there's the three most important things of IT operations. Number one is documentation. Number two, documentation. Number three, documentation. And they're the three most important things. And the key thing is it's got to be constantly updated because documents get out of date very quickly, and you've got to keep that knowledge base. So you're hoping that the platform that you're going to use, the knowledge-based platform, will keep the knowledge base not just populated but up to date. So there'll be reminders and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. And what would you say are the key challenges if we look at where we are right now in the industry? We're just coming out of a pretty tough time. Everybody's trying to restart. What would you say the key challenges are right now in running a successful IT help desk? Resources is our biggest issue right now. Yeah. Finding resources, and not only warm bodies, but skilled resources for what we're trying to accomplish. Right. And are you sharing the resources that you've got? Are they kind of being pulled off onto return to service projects off the service desk? Absolutely. So whether it's bringing back IT crew members onto the ship is a struggle for us because a lot of these folks already found other jobs.
as a result of COVID, but also it's quite an exercise in prioritization because everything's happening at the same time. We're bringing systems back online. We are putting additional protocols because of COVID on board. So we need to make sure all those automations are in place. We've instituted contact tracing. All those type of capabilities are things that are hitting us like a tsunami, and we just have to kind of work through that in a manner that's more divide and conquer. We just can't hold up a ship because we're not ready.
Would you agree with that, David?
Absolutely. I mean, echoing with what John was saying is getting the right talent, getting the right people in place. What I would say, enthusiastic people, because it is a tough job receiving all these types of calls. But, you know, for me, first impressions are very important. You know, we've all been there. We would call a help desk line, whether it's AT&T or whatever, and the way they answer that phone can kind of dictate how that conversation is going to be going. So, you know, enthusiastic about their jobs, or very spirited, is important. Education, training, giving them, you know, a career path, that kind of stuff is important.
Yeah, I just want to sort of focus on this sort of resource issue because it's not just in IT. I think it's across the industry. There's been a lot of people have left the industry for other jobs because they were on furlough or whatever, you know, they have to pay the bills. I mean, what do you think the answer is to try and get these people back into cruise, at least on the IT side? Is it training academies internally? Is it trying to find people from other industries that might work? Is it trying to attract people back? Do we have to pay more? What do you think the answer is?
It's a great question, something that, you know, I think if anybody had the answer, we'd be leveraging it right away. Again, several folks already found other opportunities out there. As David said, you know, working on a ship is not an easy task. Right? You're away from your family. It is 24/7. It is daunting. But I would say, you know, yeah, maybe we need to look at what the market is paying and adjust accordingly. And we're always looking at that. So we have no problem that we will pay for the value that is being served by those individuals. But it's like I said, it's a challenge right now to find skilled labor to come on board with that. Yeah,
and we're in a situation where in the industry's restarting, you've got ships going out. You don't have 6 months to train somebody to get them used to the environment. You need people that know it. And
then, yeah, we are still bringing in, you know, we'll look for college, you know, graduates, you know, and we'll say, as long as they demonstrate the potential, then definitely we will put them on board and have them shadow somebody else so they could start learning the operations.
Yeah, I mean, at our company, we got into the apprenticeship scheme. So we have youth apprentices, and we've been doing that. That's been really good for us, but it takes 3 years to get them up to a sort of level where we can send them out anywhere. Certainly onto a ship, it takes them.
I also think just you know, let's take some of the lessons learned from the areas of other businesses. How can we market these positions? How can we make it sexy? How can we make it exciting for others to join the team and be enthusiastic about it? I think that's another way we could approach it. Obviously, with a lot of, you know, training and education that may need to go along the way to get them up to speed, but, you know, marketing it in such a way that maybe in the traditional sense we haven't done yet, and, you know, making it as exciting as one could get working with ships or going around the world.
But it is sexy, you know. The industry is sexy, you know, to work in. I mean, we don't have problems. Because we have an outsourcing company, and we don't have problems. Everybody always, they kind of want to work on the ships, and they want to kind of make the grade so they can get off the service deck and go and do projects until we send them to a dry dock. and then they come back and say, I don't want to work on the ships anymore.
But a career path, I think, as Dave was also mentioning, is very important to share with that. I mean, I think as I look at a lot of the crew members, perhaps they were somewhat ignored compared to shoreside employees. And so we want to make sure that everybody has a career path if they want to take it and make it available to them. So, and again, a lot of the folks aspire that after a ship, spending time on a ship, they want to come shoreside. And actually, that is, to us, is perhaps one of the most valuable things, is to bring on resources that have real-time experience and know the true realities that may not be found in a document, but could actually give you that reality and share that.
Okay, and what about, let's talk about sort of the shore-based teams versus the shipboard teams. How is the best way that we can get shore-based teams to most effectively support the shipboard teams? I think you might have different opinions on this, but
Well,
not
clearly,
because
yeah.
you've got different opinions, but I think just because of the nature of your two businesses.
So I would say traditionally, and one of the things that we've been changing is that the IT crew doesn't have many privileges traditionally to do reset a switch, bounce a server, rebuild an index on a database. They are always required to contact their shoreside desk, who will then find a DBA, find a system administrator to go ahead and do that. Again, as I mentioned, as we're doing that, the time is moving, and we need to address that. So one of the things that we're doing is how do we empower more members of our ships so that they could actually resolve the issues. Many times it's been almost comical that it actually goes through a whole string of steps to contact people, and eventually bounces right back to the individual who actually called it in. They said, listen, just go hit the button and do that. And those are things that we want to make sure they do. There's also been concerns like, well, if we do that, they're going to break something. Well, let's make sure they're trained. Make sure we trust them. Make sure we empower them so they can resolve their issues that can be resolved on board. Now, if it gets out of their hands, then by all means, look for help shoreside.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is send the shoreside staff on board the vessel for a few days during dry dock, whatever it is. Have them, walk in their shoes and learn what they experience, and see how, when they get back to the office, how they can make it better. How can they make it more resilient? How can they improve upon the level of service that they're expecting on board, but also the system managers and those working on board have to support these systems. I'm a big proponent of sending people on board for just living the life for a little bit to learn.
Okay, great. Now, what would you say is what specific technology has impacted how ships are supported in most recent years? I mean, if this was a traditional, if we weren't talking about ships, we'd probably say the cloud, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But obviously we have a different environment on ships. But
I think satellite has been a big boost with bandwidth capacity growing consistently, has changed the entire environment. Now with the advent of low orbiting satellites, and then they're all meshed together. Now we're experiencing lower latencies, and then the possibility of maybe having cloud-based systems where we have that on land. Maybe perhaps that'll work on vessels as well with those low orbiting satellites. I think that's going to be a key technology going forward, and seeing how we can get closer to the cloud.
About you, John, would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, I would agree. It's interesting, in the rest of the world, it's a cloud-first approach to everything, and obviously that's counter to what we do on the ships. The new entrance into the satellite market is quite significant. I think it's going to change the landscape of it. Again, having lower Earth orbit technologies available to us. But regardless, it still doesn't deal with the weather issues. It doesn't deal with the proximity, the longitude, latitude issues that you run into as a result of that. So we're still looking at technology on board, making the ship still self-sufficient so it doesn't have to depend on the satellite. Number one, for reliability. Number two, for cost. We'd rather give most of that satellite bandwidth to our guests, who are paying guests, to actually have a good experience with it. So that's a key one that we have in there. But we also see other technologies. Again, we mentioned contact tracing before. We talked about also how we're doing mustering in a very different manner coming out of COVID. And all those things are requiring to have necessary bandwidth on board to make that. And we got to make sure that we not only know what traffic's actually flowing through it, but also how much of it is going through.
Just sticking on with technology, what impact, and I guess this is to you, John, what about advances in AI and those kind of new technologies?
Definitely new technologies around AI, ML, those are definitely in play. We do have a great team that's actually working with us a lot on that one. I would say that we're still in our infancy stages. We haven't matured to a point where we're leveraging it at our very best, but we are dabbling in it right now.
Okay. I have noticed some questions coming in. First of all, before I go to the virtual people, is there anybody in the room that wants to ask a question? Sure.
I have a question Thanks. You did say you will reveal all, so this is a little bit away from the service help desk, but have you guys started any facial recognition technology? And if you have you had any pushback, any issues with privacy concerns, that sort of thing?
So at Royal Caribbean, even I'd say within the last 3 years, we've been using facial recognition at embarkation and debarkation in there, and it has been a huge success because it just really speeds up the time to get the guest from their car onto the ship. So significantly, and no pushback.
What about but the second part of the question, a lot of people look at it as invasion of privacy. How do you negotiate that?
I think again, I haven't run into those concerns yet, but I think once in the current environment that we live around COVID and understanding how we do contact tracing, I think people are definitely a lot more open to overseeing that, and saying, hey, how do we actually leverage that technology so we know who's actually out there to ensure that, we ensure everybody else's safety.
I think also with, I was a passenger on the Symphony of Seas inaugural, and that was my first interaction with the technology at Royal, and it was awesome. And if you can bring out also the benefits, there's no more queuing of lines, and you're getting to your destination on board a lot faster, and just highlight those benefits. I think everyone, or for the most part, everyone should be okay with it because they're benefiting from that directly.
But I would also add that we're also very meticulous about what data is being stored, what data is being transmitted, and we just do whatever is the bare minimum to make it happen.
Yeah, I was on I think I first saw that on Celebrity Edge. I came into Fort Lauderdale and got off the ship, and I was waiting to see the immigration, but just walked down the ramp. It's very good. Yeah. Okay, I think we've got a question here actually. Let's have a look. One of the virtual attendees. There's one about AI assisting help desk call message handling. Is that a game changer? But I think you said you're already doing that, or are you?
Not yet.
No, so okay. Can you envisage a larger onboard presence as more devices and services become digitalized, or a lesser onboard team with a more specialized support group on land?
So
we were going to get into this. I think this is one of our questions.
We were going to get into this, so it's a great segue. So the question is, do we reduce our manning levels from IT on a ship, or do we increase them? The way that we're looking at right now is to keep them leveled off at where they are. As I mentioned earlier on, the ships continue to become more and more technically advanced. And there's no fallback to saying, well, I'm going to just do something on paper or things like that. It's just no longer acceptable. And as a result of that, we need to make sure that the crew on board is able to deal with all issues that they come about. So while we're not looking to increase the manning levels, what we're looking to do is make sure how we upskill them. And we're investing in these individuals and making them experts in their specific fields, and have them continue progressing with that knowledge in their specific subject matter expertise.
Yeah, I echo the same thing. I mean, what I'd like to see one day as we start to digitalize more and more, the elimination of printers, anything with moving parts, so that we don't have to deal with that. Or, we're now using thin clients. Can we use virtual desktops? And again, further reduce the footprint, the maintenance related to that, or the break fixes, all that, it provides a better, more predictable environment.
Do we have any other questions from, there's a gentleman here.
Thank you, gentlemen. I wanted to touch upon the resources and finding talent. I work at a tech staffing firm, Signature Consultants here, so that's definitely something we see a lot. As far as remote work goes, we came from a world where that was a privilege, a luxury, and now it's a commodity. In a sense, how do you guys plan to game plan that or combat that as far as the candidates looking for a remote market?
So I speak for Royal Caribbean Group. To us, it is essential to have our team with us. Not only for the collaboration, but for the drive-by discussions that you don't have when you are working remotely. As I've told folks, who have talked about it, I said, careful what you ask for, because if they're individuals that want to progress in their career and they're never seen because they're remote, they're going to be overlooked. It's not because we don't like them, it's just because just human nature. If you don't interact with them, they become quickly forgotten. And so there are challenges. Is it convenient to work from home? Absolutely. The truth of the matter is there are tasks and jobs and roles that can be done remotely. And I'm less concerned about that. But when I look at leadership, when I look at the IT team of how it interacts and collaborates with other functions, to us it's just more productive to do that from an office setting.
Yeah, and I think going forward, I think we're going to have a hybrid approach where we're going to have some people in the office, some people remote, and maybe they swap, so that everyone's got equal time. But you're absolutely right. Before it was a privilege and now it's a commodity. But I think we can all prosper if it's managed well. Mm-hmm. And like John's saying, out of sight, out of mind, you're not going to progress in your career. And obviously, we want people to progress, learn, and do good with what they're doing. So I think a hybrid approach is going to be the norm overall.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've got maybe time for one more. I just want to finish on maybe if you could, what's your vision, maybe either of you, what's your vision, John, at Royal Caribbean in terms of IT operations?
Well, obviously, what's on the tip of everybody's tongue right now is, a healthy return to service, getting those ships operational again, getting the guests back on board, not only making sure that they have great experiences as we had before, but also they have great experiences in a safe manner, where they're not concerned. We tout, we advertise, we state it with no thought that, coming onto one of our ships is one of the safest places on earth. Right? It is always clean. It is a bubble. It is a great place to be. So that's where we're seeing most of that.
Okay.
We've been very fortunate at American Queen. We've been in service now since March. And all of our vessels are on the water and have passengers, a bit restricted, but for the most part, fully operational. So what I'm looking to do to make our operations even better is develop a strategic partnership around the river routes of technical support people or companies, so that we're better at responding and dealing with issues instead of having people fly and drive and so on. So that's our challenge or expectations that I'm going to be making come forward on having a more resilient and more responsive operations for support.
I would add, one thing I think is just regardless of whether it's my brand or David's here, is also looking at cost, mm-hmm. right? We've all had a rough, close to 2 years. Nobody's out of this situation right now, so we're gonna, we'll continue making investments, but they're going to be greatly scrutinized, mm-hmm. And it has to show significant value. Mm-hmm. Also, our investment in cyber is also significantly greater than it's ever been before.
Yeah, that's something you can't cut costs.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
No. Good. All right. Well, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure talking to you both.
Thank you.
But I think that's all. We're about out of time. So thanks so much for being with us today, and thanks to all the participating from the audience. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.